two. There's no such thing as a personal ideology. You can have personal ideas, but they're combinations of ideologies that other people have, right? So ideology is a way of seeing the world that you know that people like you also have, and that favors your group or what you're trying to do. And that's very normal. We all have this. We're all ideological to some degree. There's no such thing as seeing the world objectively. And what's important to understand here is that ideology is everywhere. Ideology is always there. Everything is ideological. Words are ideological. Objects are ideological. Laws are ideological. Books are ideological. TV programs, movies, politicians, obviously. So ideology is always around us. And when we don't realize it, that's when we are in it the most. It's like when you're in the eye of a storm. If you think that like you're not influenced by ideology, that's probably when you're the most brainwashed. When an ideology can make it look like it's natural, like this is just the way things are, it's not my opinion, this is just the way things are, that's when it's dominant. This is what we call hegemony. The ideology is hegemonic when it appears natural. An example of that is neoliberalism, which is a very extreme ideology in the sense that it pretends a lot. It's very different from how people used to live for the last 20,000 years. Yet, once you're in it, it seems like the most normal thing in the world, and everything else looks like it's extreme and crazy, right? When you believe that, you're most affected by it. Now, ideology, as I said, is sort of natural. You cannot really get rid of it. So when we talk about political theory, we're not just talking about ideology. You could have theories about how voting should work or about methods or things like that. But it always relates to it. There's always some ideological assumptions there, some components, or maybe your theory has certain consequences for how people see the world, right? They're always related, and that's okay. Because we shouldn't try to separate the things. We can't and we shouldn't try to. It's very dangerous. Once you pretend that we're talking about politics, but not ideologically, well, we're basically lying, right? We're pretending something is objective that is not objective. Or even worse, when we say it's scientific. Let's see. Hugo is... His phone keeps... Anyway, that's ideology. I explained this before. I'm not going to dwell on it too long. Miss Sophia, don't panic. What are we talking about today? I want to talk about maturity and ideology, right? So this is no particular theory. This is my vision on it. Let's start with the opposite. Let's start with immaturity and ideology. I think, and I wonder if you agree, that people are not very mature when it comes to political debate. That we have, at least in the North, a rather weak political culture, where we sometimes complain about politics, but we rarely discuss it. At least I don't know what your experience is with your family, of how easy it is to have political debates.
No,
my family, it kind of just broke the family.
Yes.
Which is my fault, of course, because I'm the outsider coming in with weird ideas. But
yeah, when I talk with my father about neoliberalism, he just gets mad because he hears that word every day. So he's like, "Oh no, please, no more neoliberalism." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just trying to explain."
Okay. Yeah. Diego asked, what is illiterate? Illiterate is when you cannot read. So you don't understand it, basically. So when I say that people are ideologically illiterate, it's like if you're emotionally illiterate, it means that you don't recognize emotions of other people. Well, you can have the same with ideology. A lot of the reason why we don't have good political debates, I think, is because of this. Because a number of things. One is that people don't recognize when they're being ideological, right? You have people who say, "Oh no, I don't. I'm just objective. I don't deal with ideology. I don't like politics. It's too divisive." But they will every day tell their kid that poor people are poor because they want to, which is a very ideological statement, right? That's very divisive because you kind of judge the majority of society. So people make very far-reaching ideological assumptions without realizing they're doing so. That's one thing. Another thing that I would consider immature, or not immature, is that people in general have very weak understanding of ideology. That is, I think, because of Prismo, because we had for 70 years the same party that never really explained what it was doing and didn't word it in big ideas of socialism, liberalism. It was just, this is the way, right? And it comes that people don't recognize basic political concepts like liberalism, socialism, etc. Even our president, who is a socialist, never says he is. He never uses the word, right? Um, and that's different. That's different in Europe. Here you have, because we have more options in elections. So, for example, the difference between communism and socialism is an object of discussion here, right? It's a thing you could talk about. While in Europe, it's a very evident thing. If you go to any person, construction worker, you say what's the difference between socialism and communism, or is there a difference? They look at you weird, like, yeah, communism is what they do in communist countries, and socialist is what the mayor's party is. And we know both parties, we have both of them, we see the difference. There's not really a debate there. But if you don't know this, there's a lot of confusion. Also, I think what we often do is that we have a kind of boogeyman understanding of theories. Like, what you believe is correct and everything else is crazy, right? Or even worse, it's evil. Communism is evil. Why? I don't know, but I heard it's evil. So we do that a lot. We do it with the other way too, right? Neoliberalism is bad. Why? Because it's neoliberalism. This type of moralistic understanding of ideologies doesn't help us have good debates, or doesn't get us much further as students, at least. Also, people lack historical perspective on things, placing things in context. I talked about this in my lectures on communism, that a lot of the things they did wrong, everybody else did wrong too. Like, they don't have democracy. We were a dictatorship at the same time, right? They don't have freedom of press. We didn't either. A lot of people died of hunger. We today kill about 9 to 10 million of people of hunger in good times. So things are bad, things are good, but you have to know a bit the bigger context to appreciate the mistakes and the strengths of certain ideologies and what they're doing. Right? And lastly, and worst, there is a lot of people, and a lot of them are teachers, who will claim to be objective. You all know this guy who talks about politics all the time, and you cannot shut them up, but they're apolitical. Like, they keep ranting and then like, but what do you like? Oh no, I'm not into politics. This is the worst position to have because there is no real such thing as objectivity. And well, it just means you don't want to defend anything. That's why you say you're for nothing, right? Now, all of you things are okay for ordinary citizens, but you are my Jedi apprentices. You are political science students, so you need to go beyond this. That's what we need to do in this course. We cannot really get to the next level without gaining ideological maturity, as I would call it. So how do we do that? I'm going to explain this to you in, I think, four big steps. And again, this is just my ideas, right? This lecture is just something I invented yesterday. There's no book on ideological maturity, but I've talked about ideology with people every day. So I think I have quite some experience in talking about political discussions. If we want to be more mature and get to the next level and have a mature understanding of this topic of political theory, the first thing we need to do is to accept complexity. We have to accept that there is no easy way to talk about politics. That when we talk about ideological ideas and political theories, that you cannot just generalize with these things. It's never simple. It's always ambiguous. It always depends on the context and the time, etc. But we cannot use it as an excuse. In academia, it's very common that people will say, oh, it's very complex. And really what they say is, I don't know what to say. So they'll just say it's complex. And then that kind of resolves you of saying anything meaningful. We're not going to fall into that trap, right? We're going to accept that it's complex, but we're still going to try to make sense of it. Here, by the way, you can see a picture of Dr. Doom pretending to be objective, handing out ideology to little kids. But we have to accept that what we're doing is hard, right? Physics is hard and studying at FEMA is hard, but what you're doing is also hard. And I'm going to explain you why. One reason why it is hard what we are doing, what you're doing, is because political concepts, political theories are not fixed things. In chemistry, right, phosphor is always phosphor. But in political science, liberalism is not always liberalism. It changes meaning. And that's quite confusing because we're going to read texts from people from other countries, from other centuries, and they're going to use the same words as we use, but they're going to mean different things. That's because over time, words change. At some point in time, socialism and communism were the same thing. They were the same word. They were just different ways of saying the same thing. They both meant communism in our current understanding. Only around 1900, they split in two, and socialism became its own thing. What we call social democracy or democratic socialism became its own thing, and communism, well, stayed what it was. But if you read old texts of communists, they will call themselves socialists, and you're very confused. I thought socialism was something different. That's because of the time, right? Things change over time, and that's okay. People have to use new concepts. Just like liberalism and neoliberalism, you could say that neoliberalism really is classic liberalism, blah, 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 but that's not what the word means today. So we're going to use it. We're always going to use the word in the latest sense, right? At least as I'm using the words. I'm using them as they understood today. But you might read an old text which uses them differently, and that's difficult. Also, sometimes words have different meanings on purpose. We saw this with Hitler last semester, that he called his fascist party the National Socialist Party, because socialism was popular and he just wanted workers to vote for him. Then he would abolish the syndicates and screw them over and kill them. But, people do tricks, especially politicians. And so words don't always mean that much, right? Just like National Socialist Party were not to be a socialist. It's like North Korea is also the Democratic Republic of North Korea. Doesn't mean they're democratic at all, right? That's just the word. Same in Latin America, back in the Cold War, if you called yourself a socialist, the Americans would fly through the window and kill your family. So a lot of socialist leaders, they would say, oh, we are populist. And you had a lot of populist countries who really, they were socialists, but you cannot say that word. You see it even AMLO, like he hears the helicopters coming on the background. So he just calls himself, I'm from the left, right? So sometimes we use on purpose the wrong word. And lastly, concepts depend on the context. A good example here is conservatism. what it means to be conservative depends on what you're reacting against, right? A conservative in Canada would mean that you're against gay marriage. Conservative in Saudi Arabia means that you think a woman shouldn't leave the house. The Canadian conservative has considerably different beliefs on women than the Arabian conservative, right? So what is conservative is progressive, that depends on what you're fighting against, right? Same with nationalism. Nationalism is very different if you're a big or you're a small country, what that actually means. So that's the difficulty that you will have to learn to deal with. I'm sorry, Miss Marianne. Also, and this is a deeper one, it's hard to talk about political theory because there is a big gap between theory and practice. And that's not the fault of theory. It's not that the theory is bad. It's just that especially in a democracy, you will never have it your way fully. You can have your program, you have your beliefs and your ideology, but you almost never can exactly do that. So whatever real world example I can give you of a theory is always watered down. It's never the pure thing. Why is that? Partly because a lot of governments in the world are coalition governments. They have more than one party. It's quite rare, actually, that you have a government with just one party. We have that now. But in the past, for example, and we kind of hid this, but for the past 18 years, we had coalition governments. You think this is not true, because you said, no, Felipe Calderon is from the PAN. But the PAN never had a majority in Congress. In practice, it always was PRI and PAN. Regardless who was president, you had two parties. So they never had it their way fully, right? Because they always have to take the other one into account. So when you have these alliances, you never get to do the thing you really want to do. That's just how it is. Another reason why you never find it pure is because as a leader, you don't just get to focus on your plan, because you're responsible for a whole lot of other things that have nothing to do with what you want to do. For example, AMLO doesn't care about big business, but he still needs to deal with them. He cannot just ignore them, right? Same with Calderon. I think I can confidently say he didn't care for poor people, but he cannot ignore poor people because they're the majority. You have to deal with things, right? You have to do something for everyone. So it's not because Calderon did some things to help single mothers, for example, that he's a socialist now, right? He just had to do it because he's not an idiot. He knows that, like, I'm responsible, I have to do things. Doesn't mean that you agree with what you're doing, you just do it because you're responsible. So a lot of times presidents, leaders act different than their ideology just because they're also responsible for those things. Or they're not stupid, they understand they need to please the people. We see it with the pandemic now. A lot of liberal leaders have lockdowns. Lockdowns are not a liberal idea, but it's dead or dying, so you're going to do it. Just like a lot of socialist countries are going to have austerity. Not because they want to, but well, there's no money, so you have to save on something. And lastly, things are very disturbed by personality. Personality of leaders really matters. You see this in communism. It's all the same theory, but they're all doing something different because the guy in charge has a different opinion on things. And so you have this difference between theory and practice. Are you still awake? Or am I can see you're awake, but maybe you're watching The Mandalorian on Netflix on the background.
Yes, we
No,
are.
we're here.
No,
We're
already
doing
finished it.
other things.
Okay. In Udam, people would literally watch Netflix while I was talking. So, in classroom, presential. So it's complex and it's ambiguous. We have to understand that ideology is not clear-cut. Again, for two reasons. One is that each big political theory that we're going to see, liberalism, nationalism, etc., they have an internal diversity. I explained this last time. They're like political spectrums of their own. There's a left and a right in everything. There are left conservatives. You have communist conservatives. You might not think of them, but they exist. It's called liberation theology. And you obviously have very right-wing conservatives, right? That's evident. Mexico Libre, for example. But you have both. And so you cannot just generalize about a big ideological family as if they're all doing the same thing. And that's very unfair too, because especially people on the extremes tend to do this, far left, far right. They tend to see themselves, okay, we're the pure ones. Let's say you have very communist party, they say, okay, we're the real and everything else is the right, right? Socialists are on the right, other communists are on the right, they're all the right. And that's just a word that you say not to deal with them. But that's nonsense, because all of these other groups have their internal fights between left and right that are very meaningful and that matter. So it is a bit more complex than that. Also, it's a bit hard to say what is a good example of an ideology. Socialism is the easy case. Socialism in Latin America, first thing you think about is Venezuela, right? That's the example. It's a bad example. But as I explained you last time, most countries were socialist in the last 20 years, and most countries did good. So which one do we look at, right? You can find bad examples of everything. You can find good examples of everything. So that's a bit of a challenge for you. Like, what is most representative, right? Is it representative? This is a difficult question. Is it representative of an ideology if it goes bad? Like, you try something and it completely goes wrong. Let's take Cambodia with communism. Cambodia ended horribly in a genocide and it just failed the country. Is that because communism was bad or because their leader was an idiot? I would say the second, but you could say no, they would have never had an idiot leader if they didn't have centralized power. So it really is communism's fault. And that's, and you can make the same debate for liberalism and right. And that's a big question in politics. And I'm not going to answer that question for you. I just ask you to be consistent. If you say that when capitalism fails, oh, that's not really capitalism, we don't have enough competition, then you have to also accept that when communism fails, that's not really communism. It's just bad leadership, right? You can defend any point, but that's a big debate. Are the extremes really part of the thing or not? And lastly, it is complex what we're doing, and it's difficult, and it takes time to learn, because we learn about ideology through ideology. You understand what I'm saying now already through a certain ideological perspective, right? It's not like we talk about politics from outer space and we just look at the world. We're already in the world. You already are at least 18, I hope. And, you have experiences and impressions, and those will shape what you're seeing. So we never see the pure thing. And this really matters as a teacher. This is very clear to me that the ideology you grew up in really shapes how you see things. I have to spend half my time correcting stereotypes about things that are not here, about ideologies you don't know about, because Hollywood told you they're like this or they're like that, right? And this really matters. This goes deep. People's understanding of the outer world. And the same in Europe, right? So here neoliberalism kind of made people believe that communism and socialism are the same thing. But in Europe, if we talk about progressive politics, it took me a long while to understand why abortion was even a thing. Because in Belgium, it's so self-evident. It's just not a question. And I would just, like, when I first came, I just make fun of conservatives. Say, what are you talking about? Because I never took it serious. Until I became a father myself, was like, yeah, maybe killing this creature on the screen is a big deal, right? When I hear its heartbeat, this is not so simple. And I increasingly understand both sides of the debate now, right? because ideologically, like I just didn't take it serious, but now I do. So it matters where you come from, and we are largely an American's influence. But also, you cannot learn about politics without going through the politics of the person that teaches you. Whether it's me or even worse, it's some guy online. Well, I am online, but some YouTube thing. That doesn't make it more objective. Or you're just going to read a book, and that doesn't help because the person wrote the book, right? You always have to deal with ideology of the class itself. My solution to that is to be transparent, right? Just to repeat, I am involved with Morena. I'm part of the Institute of Political Formation. I try not to talk about that, but the same like pretending that Samuel is somehow neutral. Samuel Garcia as a teacher, that's nonsense, right? And he shouldn't be. I mean, it's cool to have a senator as a teacher. So my solution to this is just to be open. And if you think I'm too biased, tell me. Right? Teacher, your examples to one side, we're tired of this, you're boring us. Okay, I'll pretend to be a nationalist. I can do that too. And lastly, I just want to say to you, you shouldn't corner yourself. Like you probably have ideological beliefs already, but you still are young enough to change your mind. At a certain age, that just becomes hard because your mind is too full of experiences. You can still do it, but it's harder. You are not there yet. So don't do it. Like, don't say, oh, I'm Marxist, therefore I only want to know about that. Or I'm liberal, so everything else is nonsense. Like, you don't need to do this. You still have the flexibility of mind to be open, so use that. Any questions so far on my long rant? What do you think, Mr. Hugo?
Well, I think that's a good point because if you just keep looking to a certain theory, you will become maybe just like a fanatic, a political fanatic. So that like interferes with your own logic process of thinking. So you will just lose your mind basically. And I think that well, seeing things from different perspectives can give you more like goods and bads, so you can decide what is the best applicable to a situation, or you can understand other people.
Yeah.
Because also like this fanatism, it is also what creates a lot of conflict. So we cannot get to a point because everyone is just like trapped in their boxes and they don't want to listen to the other and they don't have more than a point of view. So I think that it's good just to watch and see what other well ideologies or what other ways of thinking have to offer. I see a very clear like example in when was all this stuff of the campaign, the previous presidential election in the US. Like people just went like, "Go Trump," and I'm a Trumpist, and I just for Trump, but they didn't even realize what kind of ideological ways of thinking he had, or what the other candidate had to offer, because they didn't really take it in account. Like they were just fanatics, they were just Republicans, and they were just Americans, and were for liberty and democracy, and that's it. But they didn't even mm, like realize or saw Trump, like analyze him in an ideological path. Like it was just fanatism. So I think that this well, seeing different perspectives can help us to avoid that, so we can not just go as a, was like as a ship.
Yeah, and that's people in general, right? But as students, it's especially important because at some point you cannot stay open-minded forever. Well, you could, but that's not very beneficial to you if you want to have a career in politics, because you have to join a party or at least accept, at least being willing to work under a government at some point, right? But you're not there yet.
Yes.
So as long as you can stay free, you should stay free. That's more my point. Now, The second point about political maturity has to do with expectations. Expectations are everything in how we experience politics and political theory. How we judge things is very heavily influenced by what we're expecting. For example, I would be very happy if you would give me a Nintendo Switch. It would be the greatest thing ever, unless I'm expecting a PlayStation 5. Then Nintendo Switch is a bit old. It's just a Switch. But, you know, if I wasn't expecting a PlayStation 5, I'd be like, oh, this student just gives me stuff. Like, awesome, right? So your expectations really form how you're going to think about things. And I think a mature way of looking at politics is to expect neither perfection nor total failure. These are two traps where people have expectations that are both unrealistic and that will just make them cynical. So on the one hand, and I've talked about it before, is that I think it's childish to think that there's only one thing that works and everything else is nonsense. Like they just fail. These are the ideologies. They don't really work. I hate these words, saying that something doesn't work. You should really be humble here. Everything that we're going to talk about in this course, liberalism, socialism, nationalism, conservatism, communism, they were there before you, right? These are 100 years old ideas that thousands of people have written about, that have been tried in multiple countries, and hundreds of millions of people have voted for each of these ideas. It's not some guy invented yesterday in Starbucks and tweeted about, oh, here's a crazy idea, right? Let's have free trade. Like, this is not like that. It's very arrogant to think that these things don't work. They just not work for what you want to do, but they work. Like, they didn't instantly fall. Communism didn't just dissolve when they tried. It ended, but it, you know, as I explained last time, people had normal lives, sometimes better than people in other countries had. You know, you grow up, you go to school, you go to work, you get married, you have kids, you die. Just life goes on. It worked in a basic sense, and that goes for all of them. So we shouldn't be that arrogant to think that, you know, these are all serious ideas, let's say. And they are there for a reason. If they were total nonsense, they would not have convinced hundreds of millions of people. They're also there because sometimes because they need to be, because they represent a certain interest that is permanent. For example, liberalism or conservatism represents the elite. As long as the elite is there, conservatism is going to exist. No matter how much you rhetorically beat it or defeat it with arguments, it's not going to die because it's there, because it represents interests, right? You cannot just brush it aside and think it would be gone forever. So you cannot defeat an ideology by just winning an argument. That's not how it works. It's not like you say, debate me, bro, and then you say something wise, and the other person just explodes and like everybody disappears that shares his belief. That's not how it goes. Ideologies are too broad. There's too like you can beat them on one. For example, yesterday I published a new essay on my blog, which you should check out, dear students, where I do a more or less frontal attack on liberalism. I argue that liberalism failed in COVID times in two big ways, because of individual freedom and because of government inaction. And I think I make a good point, of course, I think that. But that doesn't mean I kind of won the debate now. It just means I made a point, right? It doesn't end liberalism. There's too much there. And also, it's not because something ends that it failed. It's not because the right now lost the elections in Mexico that they're gone, right? The PRI didn't stop existing. And that goes for a lot of things in the world. It's not because ideologies changed that they didn't work. Same with communism. It was just time. People were tired of it. Didn't mean that 10 years before that things were okay. Just at some point, it's time for change. So things work. On the other hand, it's equally childish to think that an idea is perfect, or that one idea is going to solve all problems in the world. Again, reality is too complex for that. Humans, things are too bad and too complex for one brilliant idea to solve all problems. So if you're honest about political theory, you have to understand its limits. A lot of trouble starts when we don't do that. You should not expect a political theory to be perfect. That's not what you should be looking for, because it doesn't. You won't find it. You can delude yourself into thinking that, but it doesn't exist. An example would be, and you see this both on the left and the right, but neoliberalism is an easy example. Neoliberals, when pressed, will say that, or not neoliberals, but students that believe in this, they'll believe, for example, that neoliberalism will solve poverty, which in the last 40 years has never happened. This is a bit of a weird belief, but you could theoretically, make it look like that, right? But here you're setting yourself up for failure, because you're expecting something of your own belief, of your own ideology, that it's not trying to do. Neoliberalism is not trying to help poor people. So you shouldn't expect it to achieve that either, right? Or you shouldn't be disappointed if that doesn't happen, or heartbroken, because that's not really what it's trying to do. The same with, if you're an environmentalist, that's not going to solve security issues. You can make some kind of theory in which it does, but you shouldn't be disappointed if that doesn't happen. Same with socialist and economic growth. I would never promise that we're going to have massive growth if you vote for me, because I couldn't explain how I would do that. I can make a defensive case. I can point at socialist countries that did really well, and most actually happen to have done really well. But that's still not the same as pretending that, you should expect this. So at best, an ideology can make a defensive case. It can say, okay, as a neoliberal, okay, we're going to have inequality, but that is justified, or it's not that bad, or something like that, right? Or it's going to be okay, or it's going to pass after a long while. You can make defensive cases, but if you pretend that one point of view is going to solve everything, you're going to be disappointed all the time, and you're going to become cynical, and you're going to turn away from politics. This happens a lot. People who expect everything to change, and then they win, and then that doesn't happen. But it's really, well, now I'm ranting more on party politics, but you shouldn't expect things from people they don't promise, right? And that goes for ideologies too. Now, the question then is, and you can interrupt me, right? If I'm boring you, if I say nonsense, Miss Sophia, hit the buzzer and correct me, please. What does that mean for political debate? It means that among at least mainstream ideologies, right? You have certain ideologies that are little and that did fail. Like you have things that just never amounted to much. Anarchism is one. Anarchism, I would say, just hasn't achieved much in history. They never won elections. There's no anarchist country. They had some cities that were okay at some points, but it's not the same weight class as communism or conservatism is. But among these big five, there's just limits in how much one can defeat the other. Right? We can contrast ideologies, and one can be better than the other, but it cannot obliterate, it cannot eat the other one completely. Why? Because we can have logical arguments, we can talk about facts, but at some point, let's say I'm attacking your beliefs, right? At some point, you're going to come to a moment where it's just about values. You'll say, yes, what I'm doing will fail, but at least I'll be free, right? So, okay, nobody can wear masks and we have no regulation during the pandemic and we'll all get COVID, but at least we were free. There's not much I can say to that, right? Okay, you think freedom is more important than surviving. Yeah, I can't convince you otherwise, I guess. So at some point it just comes down to values. And that's where you reach a stalemate, right? Same with, oh, this regime was bad. Yeah, but at least we achieved equality or security or whatever. Okay, some things boil down to one value, and that's kind of a hard line that you can retreat to. And that's where the discussion ends. Because values are fundamentally still different. You're going to read an essay in about 2 months called Two Concepts of Liberty by Berlin. This is one of, I think, the top 5 best things ever written on politics. And it's a liberal text. I don't like what he's saying, but I recognize that he's right. And his conclusion, he makes the point that you cannot reduce values to each other. At the end of the day, you have to make choices. You can have a communist society and you can be free to an extent, but you cannot pretend you have the same freedom as you would have in a liberal society. At some point, you're making a choice. You're making a trade-off. You're trading one for the other, right? You can try to cheat and you can like reformulate what freedom means. You can say, well, freedom really is security. And okay, but that's only true to a certain extent, right? So at some point you're making choices. And so certain trade-offs cannot be resolved, and certainly not by science. You cannot just let a robot decide, because a robot is gonna, it has to make a choice between security or freedom. That's gonna happen. And you can always, from either security or freedom perspective, argue against that. So there's limits to where we can go with debate. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have debate. It's not, I don't believe in relativity. I don't believe that, you can believe whatever you want and there's nothing I could say about that, right? That's just your thoughts and there's nothing I can do. That's not how the world works. I think you can have meaningful debate, and you should, right? Because some positions might simply be wrong in the facts. I now and then argue with climate change deniers. I can, we can have a respectful discussion, but at the end of the day, you're wrong and I'm right. And that's just how it is. Like if you talk about facts, climate change is real, and I just won't have it. If any of you wants to deny this, this class will go on forever until I get you to my side, but that's just how it is, right? So some positions can just be wrong in the facts because you're talking about things that didn't happen. Also, you can still expose certain premises, like, oh, you're really saying that because you're scared of this or that, right? Or you could have a meaningful debate about the shortcomings of someone's ideology without trying to convince them otherwise, right? Like, oh, this is a risk with communism. The point is not that you stop being communist. The point is that you understand the risk. Right? That's the point of our discussion, and that's meaningful and valuable on its own. And lastly, I don't think any ideology is like the answer forever to everything. But I think we can have a very good debate about what right now is what we need to do, right? Given a certain problem, some theories are going to have better solutions than others. They're not the solutions to everything, but right here, right now, with the current problems that we have, one might be better than the other. And that's really what we're talking about in politics. It's not one idea defeating the other. It's just one being more appropriate than the other. Do I still make sense?
Yes, you do.
Miss Sophia is in level 115 of Tetris in the meantime, on the background. Okay, let's keep it pushing. Miss Mariana.
What are the 5 modern theories?
Well, the 5 that I'm using in this course, right? This is not some, this, I just invented this for this course, but we are going to talk about socialism, communism, liberalism, conservatism, and nationalism. Those are the 5 positions that you will most likely see in political debates. There's others. You have anarchism, you have environmentalism. We're also going to talk about them, but they're not on the same weight yet. Like they don't win elections yet, etc., etc. These 5 have a reasonable chance. Not necessarily in Mexico. In Mexico, it's mainly a fight between 2 of them, but in the world, right? Those are like the 5 big ideas, who all have hundreds of variants and mixes and all of that. All right, so where are we going with all of this? Let's talk about the goal of this course. Right, because what I've said so far is kind of interesting for people in general, but now I want to talk about you as aspiring political science professionals. What we need to do, or what you need to do in the coming years, is to move beyond an individual appreciation of ideologies. What do I mean with this? In my last course, History of Political Thought, what I'm basically doing is giving people options, right? Saying this guy said that, that woman said that, this guy critiqued this guy for that, and here you have it. And it's interesting for students to kind of learn what they like and what they don't, and what inspires them and what makes them scared. And that's good. That's orientation. That's learning what you like or what appeals to you. But if you want to do this in a professional sense, not in a citizen sense, you need to move beyond that. It's no longer about what you like. This course is not about figuring out, what your real color is. It's about understanding each of these ideas, right? This is not about, like, sometimes I get students, for example, I once were having a discussion on trade policy for farmers, another course. And this guy was like, yeah, this theory doesn't really help the farmers, but it's best for me. And I stared at him and said, well, what does it even mean it's best for you? That's not the question. The question was best for the farmers, right? So it's not about you. I know it sounds mean, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to understand the strengths, weaknesses, and problems of different ideas, including different ideas than yours. Why is that what we need to do? For 5 reasons. The first one is because you do not necessarily get to choose who you're going to work with. It depends a bit what your plan is with political science, but if you plan to work in an administration, let's say a city administration, you don't control the outcome of elections, right? Let's say you're with the PAN wins, okay, they give you your job because of corruption and not corruption, because of favoritism. You become, manager of cultural events for the city of Garcia. And next 4 years later, PAN loses elections and Morena wins, but you're still there, right? So you're gonna have to deal with political views that are not your own if you want to be in civil service. For example, I was a researcher of poverty, right, in Belgium. I worked for the government, but I worked under socialist government. That was cool because I was of the same party. Then they lost, and I got a conservative minister. I was not going to just stop talking to my boss. Right? That would be ridiculous. I still want to convince him of the right, her in this case, of the right policies. So you need to adapt to that. Also, because let's say you become a politician and you get into power, there's going to be practical circumstances that are going to demand you to engage with other ideologies because your plan just didn't work. Like you pretend to spend money on something, and then the money's gone because your compadre stole it, and now now it's time for austerity politics because there's no more money. The same way around, right? You might have the plan to to privatize everything, and then the pandemic happens, and now people want you to do something. You can't just be like, well, every man for themselves. But you can do that, but you're going to lose elections. So you need to learn the toolkits, let's say, of other ideologies, to borrow ideas from them. Right? It's interesting. You can take a concept of an ideology that doesn't appeal to you, but that specific policy sounds like it works, and you can give it a different name, and then now it's yours. This is interesting. A fourth reason, probably the most important one, is you want to learn to speak the language of other ideologies. Each ideology has its own language, its own way of words they use for the exact same thing, right? One party will call it taxes, Frena will call it terrorism, right? Ideologies have different words for the same thing. And if you want to be like a lobbyist, you need to speak all of them. For example, I have the concrete objective of passing unemployment insurance in Leon. I've been working on that plan for a while, and I've been lobbying with it, and I want this state to have unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance is a policy where if people lose their job, they get money for a few months until they find a new job, right? And have to look for a job. I, of course, first, I'm trying to pitch this idea to my own party, which is Morena in this case, because that's the easiest. But I know that even if we would win the governor, we're not going to win Congress. We won't have, nobody will have a majority in Leon. Whoever wins, they won't have a majority. It's a four-way race. It's not going to happen. So you need to talk to other parties at some point, because you need to pass this law, right? So I can start with my own party, but I have to talk to PRI and I have to talk to Movimiento at some point if everything goes well. Probably won't reach it, probably will fail very soon, but if I do that, I need to explain my plan. You know, I cannot be like, well, it's time for the capitalist class to pay their fair share and give it to the workers. And I'm talking to the PAN, they'll just laugh at me. I have to be, well, you know, with this policy, we could stabilize the economy. It will stabilize demand. They'd be like, oh, that sounds very educated, very well prepared. And you know, like you might have the same arguments, you just have to say them in different order, right? So it's good to learn what words. For example, let's say you want to pass gay marriage, right? Gay marriage is not particularly a concern of the working class. They have other problems than this. So, and especially if you make it pure identity, right? We want it because we deserve it. You have construction workers say, yeah, and I deserve high wage, and nobody gives it to me either, right? So let's say you want to convince a working class party like Morena of this. You have to talk about how not having gay marriage violates labor rights. Because if you don't have gay marriage, you cannot get health insurance to your partner, right? You cannot get pension to your partner. So you cannot get, I don't know, family bonuses, whatever it is. So not having gay marriage leads to breaches of labor law. And then they'll be like, oh, so the capitalists are trying to steal from us. And you're like, yeah. Oh, then we should have gay marriage, right? This is fiction, but you have to speak the language of different ideologies if you want to convince them. And lastly, it's good to know about others because you want to know what they think about you and kind of anticipate criticism and know where your weak spots are, right? So that's what I want us to achieve. Any questions or remarks so far? Do I still make sense? Or do you have the feeling that like we're losing our teacher? He's drifting into outer space. No?
No, it actually
No, I
makes
think
a lot of sense
everything is very
because
understandable.
I truly see this in the ways you understand feminism. Because, for example, you have this liberal feminism, which only looks to put women on the same level as men, as if they were the standard and amazing thing of humanity. That's the way to understand, but it also oppresses the working class because it does not liberate all women. But then you have, I don't know, radical feminism that doesn't, that it does not include in a very kindly way trans women, so they also make some harm. But then you have the feminism that sees sex work as work, and then we are the ones who see sex work as terrible and something that has to be abolished. So I truly see there's all this class understanding in feminism, because I also think that I will add that you have to be kind of brave to feel insecure, because ideologies, of course, give us this sense of safety and hope and all these pretty things. But also, you have to be brave to see that you have weak spots and something that you believe are not everything. And you have to be brave with your own feelings. You have to be honest with yourself.
I think feminism is a good example of, in Mexico at least, a movement that's not very self-critical, which leads them to make mistakes, where they go too far, where, you know, if you just didn't say this one thing, you might have won, or where you have a lot of subgroups that all think that they're the real feminists, and they're like, oh, but you're not real. And then they start excluding other women from this movement, and then, you know, you get smaller. Yeah. So that's indeed what we're trying to correct. Thank you for sharing this, Miss. Is anybody else? Yeah.
I have also seen these kind of things in Twitter between the real leftish people and the ones that are a bad left people. So
It's a classic.
yeah, so I don't understand why these fights, and yeah, I didn't thought about the feminist part, and yeah, it's like a real problem, I think.
Oh yeah. So we're trying to move beyond that, right? So okay, I'm not the guru of this, but let's try it, right? Let's try. You've seen these like type of like get rich quick ads on YouTube, like 4 quick tips to become a millionaire next. We're gonna do the same thing with them with politics, right? In 4 easy steps. Step 1, no. With, you know, the borrowed car behind me that really is on lease, but I'm trying to pretend it's mine. Step 1. How are we gonna grow this? Not achieve it, just start the journey. Step 1 is I would like to ask you very sincerely to invest some of your time and energy in developing an open and especially fact-based worldview. This sounds very trivial advice, but let me explain this to you as a sociologist. That's what I really am, right? You have something called sociology of knowledge, which studies what people know, which sounds very weird thing to study, but it's very relevant. And if you think about it, most things that people know, they don't know for certain. Most things that are in your head are not based on you reading a research paper about that. They're based on most of it said, things that make sense, things that you experienced once, things that just sound logical, but that doesn't mean they're actually true. That doesn't mean they're based on data, right? You don't know them for sure. Most things you don't know for sure. You just know them enough to live. But it's interesting to invest a bit in having a more, and by fact I mean actual data, statistical worldview. Because a lot of what we think, well, things change over time, right? A lot of our ideas are based on stereotypes that usually are outdated. So it's good to keep up with things. What will that do for you? it will stop you from bluffing. It will stop you from talking about things you don't really know, which you don't want to do because you're open to counterattack, right? You just claim something, but then it's not really true. That's a bit shameful. And if you're a fascist, then you will double down on your lie, like Trump. Like Trump says things all the time, and then they're wrong, and he knows they're wrong, but then, you know, he has to convince everybody else they're wrong, or they're liars or fake news or whatever. You don't want to go down that route of having to aggressively defend your mistake. And at the same time, you don't want to fall for other people's bluffs either. Oftentimes, I've experienced in my life that I was right all along. I just believed other people's bullshit. Like, I didn't know they were not serious persons. So like, oh, this guy is a suit. He must be talking the truth. Or he's a Mexican. I'm not a Mexican. So this Mexican, you know, they must know better about history of their country. And then like 2 months later, I'm like, they had no clue what they were saying. Like they were wrong all along. So you want to not do this. You not want to give in to people without knowing if they're actually right, right? I had this a lot growing up. I was always a bit on the left, but I was more in a romantic left stream. It was more about theory and ideas and justice and all of this. And I always stayed away from statistics because I wasn't good at math, and I thought it wasn't for me. And I thought the numbers, they won't prove me right anyway, right? They're corrupt or whatever. So I always, until my PhD, I was still very theory focused. Only after becoming a teacher and having to like stay up at night, study things to explain to you, I learned, oh, I was right all along. Like the numbers actually go my way on this or that issue, right? Not to name a specific example, but, and I really wish I knew earlier. I wish I knew earlier that, oh, I was right all along. So don't be scared of being proven wrong. You might be proven right as well, just by having a more factual and especially more historical view. Because if you have a more historical view, you won't fall for things. Right? To give you an easy example, this is partly political. I'll apologize for my bias. You can counter this with an example you own, but one thing you very often hear is, oh, but AMLO, he destroyed so many jobs, right? Unemployment today is lower than it was before. You wouldn't think that because we're in a crisis, but I can show this to you in real time if you want me to. This is data from last week. Unemployment in Mexico in the middle of the crisis is 3.8%, which is lower than it was in 2018. You wouldn't know that if nobody told you that, right? So it was, you know, or I could tell you something, maybe I'm bluffing, right? And look it up, prove me wrong, right? Point is that the more raw data you consume, the more robust your framework will be. And especially when it comes to comparisons. I know I'm ranting a bit now, let me focus again. I could prove to you any point as long as I can choose who I'm comparing, right? I can prove you right any ideology by just taking the best of my own and the worst of yours, and then I'm comparing them, and it looks like I'm right. Yes. The more you know about countries, the more countries you know, the more histories you know, the least likely you're about to fall for this or to do this yourself. Let me give you the concrete example on my slides here. Taxes. Let's talk about income tax. This is old data, but it doesn't matter because it didn't change since then. This is from Peña Nieto era. This is not about party politics. It's from Peña Nieto's era. Here you have income tax as percentage of GDP between two countries. You have Chile and Mexico, right? Mexico in red, Chile in blue. As you can see, income tax in Mexico is about 2 times what it is in Chile. Yes. Now, based on this, Ms. Mariana, would you say that Mexico has high taxes?
Yes.
Yes, right? It's like double that of Chile. Super high taxes. Now, I'm of course cheating because I'm showing you two countries, right? If we zoom out, this is the real picture. This income tax percentage of GDP with all industrialized countries. Chile is still in blue, Mexico is still in red. What I did is I took the lowest country in the world and compared it to the third lowest country. So it looks like we have high taxes, but really we have like 1/3 of the average. So that's very easy to do, right? And you won't know unless you know more countries, but I'm still cheating you because I'm talking about income tax. Income tax is only one type of tax, right? If you look at taxes as a whole, total tax revenues percent of GDP. I know this is, you cannot see the little names. It's maybe a bit too zoomed out, but Mexico is the red bar. Chile is the blue bar. Total tax burden, we have the lowest taxes in the industrialized world. Nobody ever told you that, right? You wouldn't know. You just know what your taxes are and you think they're too much. And everybody thinks that. My wife thinks that too. But only if you, like, I'm coming from Belgium. I know what taxes Belgium are. Like, I don't feel like taxes are high here, right? But you won't know if you never see the big picture. So it's very easy to trick people with comparisons. And if you know more data, you won't be tricked and you won't also trick people. So that's the first thing, developing an open and fact-based worldview. That takes time, right? That just comes with studying and that will kind of go. Second thing, and here I have to watch out that I don't talk for the rest of the time because it's something I'm very passionate about. Be willing to both critique and defend ideas. This is truly when we talk about maturity now. At your age, and this is really an age thing too, at your age, it is good to be critical. To be critical of what, I know, your family told you, of what your high school told you, of your current politics, your president, your governor, your religion. It's good to be critical to free yourself, right? That's kind of what you're doing. When you're growing up, people told you things as a kid, and they did that with good intentions, but now it's time to learn how it really is. So you have to be critical. But there will come a time, and you're not there yet, but there's a time where it's also time to defend certain things, to not just be critical, to be constructive. Some people never reach that stage and they just stay cynical all their life. But it is interesting to at some point have some standpoint. A standpoint is a point you stand on. It's a very dumb definition of mine, but like take it literal. If you don't have a standpoint, you're standing on nothing, right? You don't stand for anything. That's a bit boring. If you're just only critical, and if you're only interested in telling other people why they're wrong, it will harm your development. Because defending things, whatever it is, right? It could be a very conservative position. Defending ideas develops a certain set of skills that is different from attacking ideas. And it comes with different rhetorics, different arguments, different types of knowledge you will need. And you won't develop that. I remember as a student, I was very good at being critical of stuff, right? And I was very easy just telling other why they were wrong. And elections came, and some guy just turned to me, he's like, "So why should I vote for the socialists?" I was like, "Because it's the right thing to do." And then the other guy is like, "Oh yeah, you should vote for the liberals because of this and that." And of course, I lost this debate because I had nothing to say for myself. I just knew what the other guy was wrong. I didn't know I was right? So you should try to develop this at some point. I don't think right now is the time to double down on some positions, and because you're still a bit open-minded. But at some point, you have to learn. It's a mature thing. It's like, I know, it's like with your family. let's say your girlfriend spills drink on a guy's shoes and he hits her in the face. A mature man won't be like, well, you shouldn't have spilled that drink, right? You're gonna fight this guy. Even if it ends bad for you, you're not gonna, at some point you have to defend things. You have to take a stand. You have to be responsible for things. And it is very seductive not to do this because it's so much easier to be critical. It's also better for your ego. And some intellectuals never achieve this. They just always stay on, like, there's a certain virginity to being critical because you're never wrong, right? You're always pure. You have your ideals. You criticize the world from your standards. Your standards are unrealistic, but that doesn't matter. And yeah, you always seem like you're right. Like one example of this, do you know Denise Dresser? Denise Dresser, 4 million followers on Twitter.
Yes.
Yes.
Probably most popular intellectual. If you look at what she writes, she's, and I don't mean in a sexist way, but she's always bitching about something. Like she has never a proposal. It's always why someone else is wrong. And this is cool and this will get you followers, but it limits you a bit, I find. Like I think it's hard to take serious at some point if you're not willing to take a stand. Anyway, I have to stop here because I can keep ranting on this. And it's better for you because you won't inspire if you don't defend an idea now and then. You can see this if you talk party politics. This is the tragedy of the PAN right now in the last 2 years. The PAN has been remotely successful at attacking, as criticizing. They brought down approval from 75 to 60%. But their own approval has not gone up. The PAN polls at 11%. It's not good. It's not where you want to be, right? As the leader of the opposition. So you want to, win people over by defending things, not just critiquing. Anyway, I made my point. You get my point. I have to stop talking about this. But you're not necessarily there yet. This is a thing of age. But I really respect a person that, even if I disagree with him, that will defend their ground. There's just something fundamentally respectable about it. Now, last 2 points. Political culture in Mexico, in the north especially, will never improve if we don't get better at debating each other, right? And we'll never get better at debating each other if we don't start talking to each other in the first place. So avoiding discussions does not improve things. It's kind of the way we deal with things, right? Passive, avoiding things. So I want you to engage in debates. You will grow from that. But you should do it with correct expectations. People get frustrated with discussions because they're expecting the wrong thing to happen. What, in my experience, I had to learn this too as a teacher. What will not happen, ever, is that you're going to convince a person in the moment. Like we have a debate, I prove you wrong, and you go, by Thesis, my whole life was a lie. Please send me your book so I can join you, right? That is not an outcome of discussions because that's psychologically not how discussions work. There's certain ego reasons. People can't just forsake their own ego, right? You can do it, but it's very rare that a person in a debate is going to be convinced of what you're saying. And thus you're going to be frustrated. You're like, oh, I talk to people all day and never seem to convince anyone, right? Why even bother? But that's because you're looking at it wrong. You are convincing people, but the convincing doesn't take place in the moment. It never does. You convince people afterwards. You talk to a person, you give them your best arguments. It looks like they didn't listen. Maybe they're actually not listening, right? But if they're a serious person, but you will have influenced them because afterwards they're going to think about what you said. Or next time they're about to make an argument, they're like, yeah, but it's not actually true because, she explained me why that's not true, so I'm not going to say it. So you are affecting people, just not live. And that's very important to understand what the goal is of a discussion. You're influencing each other, just not in real time. I learned that as a teacher. At first I was like, Nobody's listening to me. And then next semester I see, oh, they all think different now, or they did do the thing I told them to do, or they did sign up for this or for that. And okay. Also, there's always something to learn, right? In a debate, you can learn from other people, but even if you're not humble, like this is me as a sociologist talking, there's always something to learn. If only why this other guy is an idiot is interesting to me. Like I'm genuinely interested in why you believe that, that there's a giant conspiracy of 5G to give everyone cancer and make them gay. Like I know I'm not going to convince you. You're too far off. But I'm so interested in you. I want to know, like, how did we get this far? So there's always something to take away. And if you have a very hard, like, if you want to talk about politics with people that are hard to talk to, right? Or you're scared of damaging the relationship, right? Place yourself in a defensive position. Coin an idea and defend it, and let them attack you. What's going to happen here is they cannot get offended at you because they throw the first punch, right? And you defend against it. So you might hit them back, but they threw the first punch, so they can be mad at you. So you're going to have still political debate. You're going to exchange views, but they're going to feel, since they're the attacker, they cannot feel offended. Right? At best, they failed at convincing you, but they didn't lose anything. But really, they did lose a lot. They lost a lot of like small arguments, and they will change their mind, but not in a way that they'll feel offended by. So if you just take a position, you defend it, you can earn people's respect at the minimum, right? Well, if you are gonna go and tell them why they are wrong about their beliefs, you could do that, but that's a whole lot harder conversation to have, right? And sometimes it's necessary, like with climate change. I just won't have it, climate change denial. But it's a difficult discussion. It's easy for me to convince or to defend climate science than it is to attack conspiracy theorists, right? So anyway, these are tips I have for you in debate with normal people. None of this applies if you're in an actual political debate like on TV. Then the opposite is true. Never defend, only attack. Don't try to understand the other person, right? Talk over them. There's whole different rules of the game. That's not where we are, right? We're talking about as students talking with each other, etc. And lastly, to repeat a point I made earlier, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but I will warn you to stay away from ideas or to be critical of ideas that think that one thing will solve everything. Whether that is, oh, we should just, like fundamental ecology, we should just be guided by nature. That somehow is going to stop narcos. No. Or neoliberals, oh, if we just privatize everything, that will solve everything. I'm not saying neoliberalism is wrong. I'm saying that is a very daring assumption. Or if we nationalize everything, if the state controlled everything, there would be no more problems. These are dangerous ideas to dabble with. And I don't say this, I don't want you to mistake me for a centrist. I'm not. I'm not saying you cannot be radical. You can be I encourage people to be radical. Being radical means that you're logically consistent. You have a belief, and as long as like you think about it deeply and it keeps sounding like it's true, okay, you just take it to the end, right? If you really think that the biggest problem in the world is climate change, then I encourage you to be a vegan. That's logical. That's radical, but it makes sense. But you can be radical, but be limited. Like, don't think that this radical position then is the solution to everything, right? That's where you are going to go into dangerous waters. I have no problem with radicalism. I have a problem with people who just say the same thing for everything. like the same solution that's going to solve this. And oh, if we just like conservative, oh, the old ways are not the answer to every problem, right? But that goes for any ideology. So I have no problem with radicalism. I have a problem with, totalism. I don't know the word for this, but right, catch-all solutions. Like even on a policy level, some people think that basic income is the solution to everything. I think we can talk about basic income. Solution to everything sounds a bit weird to me. So these dogmatic beliefs, they're dangerous, and they can leave you vulnerable, right? So anyway, these are my advice. This is my advice on how to grow your political maturity. What do you think? Was this a useful lecture?
Yes, it was. It
All right.
creates like a base in which we can stand to just move forward. I think that it's a good start to have this new perspective that we don't have to be married just with one ideology. So I think that for this course, this is a good way to start.
Mm-hmm. Again, as students, right? When you get old, as Max Weber says, if you want to build your life about something, you have to choose your demons and pray to them, right? At some point, it's good to choose and to go for one idea or the other. If you want to have a career in politics, I'm talking about, right? But you're not there yet. You're too young to marry to one idea. Yeah. Okay. You read the text I asked you about. Is that true?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Yes.
You did. What did you think about the text?
The thing that shocked me most was the age of the author. More than 90 years. It was amazing.
Yeah, he's like from before your grandparents, right? Yeah, he was old when old people were old. Old already when they were young. Okay, how was it to read? Was it hard? Was it easy?
It was easy to read. But that surprised me also was that um, I know that
Sorry, you sound like R2D2 because of the connection. Can you say it again? Like the connection broke and it sounded very mechanical. It's not your mic, it was the internet, I think.
let me write it.
Okay.
Well, I agree that outrage is the motivation to do something about it, to get involved in doing things, and it is important to keep feeling what like to react to what is happening in real life. And I think it's also very important to not be he says indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, yeah, interesting.
Were you able to understand a bit the context? Because he's really writing about France, right? I don't know how easy that was. Mr. Diego, you're gonna say
Yeah,
something.
I wanted to say that it really reminded me to the last lecture of the last course you gave us, when you talk
Mhm.
about the thing of saying we can't do anything more. It will pass on because that deprive us from the outrage that, in this case, this author asked us
Mhm.
to have in order to, how was the word, militar, to, yeah, to get into uh, like some ideas and defend them, and and yeah, have hope in that order.
I hope you because sometimes students get this wrong because it's a history thing. When he talks about resistance, right? He's talking about resistance against the Nazis. Like this is not a metaphor. This is military resistance with guns. I think some people sometimes misunderstand that. World is so based on hope despite its age, those. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Uh-huh. Okay, Miss Sophia.
I like the fact that he quoted Sartre when he says that we must not condemn them by their actions because they use violence, but we must understand them. I think that's the best part for me because it kind of remind me again of feminism here in Mexico, where all these protests where they destroy and set fire to cars and all that stuff. Like if if my mother will disappear, if they will kill my mother or something, I know that I could do also do that. So I don't know. It was kind of hard for me to say like no violence because I think that sometimes violence is kind of the only thing to do the things. And also I understand it in the wrong way, but I had some problems with this discourse of hope because it kind of romanticized the social struggle, like this thing where we all get united and we look for freedom, and it seems pretty romanticized, and I don't think that we must be in that way, uh, because as I said earlier there are too many things that come by standing up in a social struggle. Like you have to be disloyal to something, you have to be brave, you most of the times have fear. So yeah, like I don't think that hope is enough when it comes to
No.
social struggle. And it was kind of romanticized. I don't like when they romanticize this discourse of how beautiful is social struggle, because at the end it will be of course beautiful to imagine this liberation and happy people around, but the process is kind of hard, and we also have to mention that.
That's true, yes. He, of course, like, you have to understand him and defend that he won World War II. So, as a rebel, right? So, when he started this, the Nazis were going to win, right? So, like, he defeated very heavy odds. So, it's a bit easier for him to be hopeful. But also, fighting is not necessarily the hardest. How do you say this? Military fights are not even the hardest fights sometimes, right? You shoot people. Some other fights can be hard and slow and take a lot more time. So yeah, I think you're right in that. Shouldn't romanticize it. Shouldn't be scared of it either. Somewhere in between. Okay, good, dear students. I would ask you to send me these homeworks that you did. For next time, what are we going to do next time? Oh, for next time, you have to read again. See, it just keeps coming. But it's another short text. We're going to read a text that's going to surprise you a lot. It's a text written by Albert Einstein, the real Albert Einstein, not some other dude, right? The physicist, about politics. And you will learn what his position is. It will surprise you. He had a very clear position, but somehow, it's taboo to talk about that. So you're going to read that text. I'm going to upload it right now. I'll do that. All right. And we're going to talk about communism next time, which gives you a tip of what the text is going to be about. Mr. Diego.
Doctor, do you want us to tell you the book that we're gonna choose for the PIA?
Thank you for saving me from my own forgetfulness. Yes, I want you to do that.
And are we gonna be able to choose like a repeated book
What?
from some classmates? Like, there's a problem if one of or
No, you can
some people
choose the
choose the same
same.
book. Okay.
Yes. So what book do you want? Mr. Diego
Oh,
Diego, you're muted.
Magallanes? Sorry?
the rhetoric of reaction.
Okay, so Diego is going to read the book of Hirschman. Okay, I will upload these books. Next, Hugo, you were going to say?
Nothing that I haven't seen. Which are the books? I'm sorry.
You were buying tacos last time.
No,
You were trading
I
GameStop
think that I will
stocks.
choose later.
Okay. Well, then next time you tell me.
No, I wish I was.
I'll if you look at my last lecture, it should be somewhere on the files at the end. I have 5 books listed there. Ms. Mariana.
A theory of justice.
Okay. Did you check if you can get it?
Yes, but do you have it?
No.
No.
There's a PDF. I think I saw it.
It's an old book though. You should be able to find it or buy it for $5 somewhere.
Okay.
It will look good on your bookshelf. Well, if you have one. Mr. Martinez.
I'm gonna beat the Theory of Justice as well.
Okay.
Teacher, I think
Yes.
that I want the origins of totalitarianism.
Okay, that's a very heavy choice. Okay, good. And Miss Sophia?
I will go with Persian notebooks.
Okay. Very good. So with that one, there's 800 pages. Like I want you to read the first 2 chapters and then you just see in the index what else you want to read as a third one. Okay. I will upload these files. For the prison notebook, it's going to look a bit weird, the PDF, because it's like 90s layout and such. But well. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll upload the 2 books here I have, which is Rhetorical Reaction and the Prison Notebooks, and the text to read for next time, which is the one by Einstein. All right?
Doctor, I have a concern.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard this concept of shadow ban?
Shadow ban.
Well,
No.
it's when some social media or Facebook, Twitter, like deliberately shadows or hides your content because they think it's not like appropriate or whatever they want. And I think that Facebook is doing shadow ban to El Extranjero Político because I have like in favorite the page, and yesterday I saw if there was some new content, and it was like the new essay, but I have been in Facebook like the all the day, and I never saw the post. So, and it happens the same in Twitter.
I have that same suspicion, but I don't know if it's ideological. It's more that I'm not giving them money. Yeah, sometimes it's weird. Like you have an article that 14 people will share it, and that will result in no new views, which is logically impossible. But that's how the statistics tell me it is. So yeah, but I don't know what to do about that. Maybe I should give them 10 pesos, and they will.
Maybe you can check out if there's a solution or something.
I remember once having an ad for a research project that I shared it myself, and a bunch of people shared it. It had like 30 shares, and nothing came of it. And then I paid Facebook 100 pesos, and we got like 30 people. We didn't have enough time to reply to it. So I do think they do this, yes. Well, yeah, thank you for telling me. It makes me feel a bit better, but I don't know what to do. All right, you have to get to your next class though. I know that. So I'm going to kick you out so you're on time. See you next Tuesday.
See
Take
you.
care.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Enjoy the weekend.